Hello, and welcome to the Cryptocurrency News Channel. This is Coronavirus Outbreak update number 2. So, 259 people have died in the last count, and 11,791 people have been affected, according to China. Now, the real number is probably quite a bit higher, but the infected to mortality rate, as I've heard from out of China, is probably either less than that or just around that amount. So there's probably more people infected and probably a little bit more people that have died, but the death ratio is actually fairly low, and that's actually from hearing from people in China itself. So the mortality rate's about 1 in 50 right now, which is a little worse than the actual flu, but not really as bad as like a level 4 virus. Now, there is a level 4 weapons lab close to Wuhan, and people are saying it was accidentally or intentionally released from the lab. I really don't think so. That is a level 4 weapons lab, and coronavirus does not fit the definition of a level 4 virus or agent. In fact, level 4 virus or agents are things like Bolivian hemorrhagic fever, Marburg virus, Ebola virus, Lassa fever virus, and Crimean. So those are very, very, very high mortality viruses. Ebola has something like an 80% cure rate, and there is no cure for it. The good thing about Ebola is it's actually not airborne, otherwise we'd be completely screwed. So level 4 viruses in that Wuhan lab, they would be extremely deadly pathogens that would kill most people it actually infects, and that is actually not what corona actually is. Corona is more likened to the flu than one of these viruses. Just as a matter of comparison, this year's flu strains actually particularly bad and actually has killed about 50,000 people worldwide while infecting millions of people. Corona is slightly more devastating and fatal than that, but it's really not that devastating as a virus if you are a healthy person that catches it. A lot of the people that have died have been old and sicker people whose immune systems have already been compromised, and even the regular flu is more likely to kill you if you are in that. So I don't think this was actually released from a level 4 lab. A level 4 lab, like it would, most people who catch like a level 4 lab virus are probably not going to survive. Generally, so the thing is, like, there have been a couple of instances in the United States, but as far as I know, no one's actually died in the US because of this virus. Like I said, because it's not that fatal to most people. It's probably worse than the flu, but it's not really like a fatal virus. They are starting to quarantine people. I think they've quarantined a few Chinese kids on a college campus that have been back to China because they showed these symptoms. But that's actually hard to do because corona symptoms are exactly the same symptoms as the common flu or the common cold. So you can't just like quarantine everyone because you don't really know if they have corona, the cold, or the flu, and they're extremely similar symptoms. Now, here's the thing, we've actually been pretty lucky in modern times for these like flu or outbreaks because they've actually like there's two things that would cause a virus to be incredibly devastating to humanity basically, and they have to have both of them. It has to be either highly contagious or it has to be extremely deadly. Most outbreaks recently have had one of the two. It's either been highly contagious or extremely deadly. It has not been both. So a highly contagious but not deadly virus would be something like corona. Basically, it's kind of almost like a variation of the regular flu, slightly more deadly, but it's still just a passing fever to most people it actually infects. So it doesn't really kill that many people. It might affect a lot of people like the seasonal flu, but it doesn't kill many people. Or it's extremely deadly like Ebola, for instance, but it's not very contagious. Ebola can only be transmitted through blood and bodily fluids, I think. So it's not going to infect many people, but the people it does infect will actually die. Now, they don't actually have a cure for Ebola. I think they've actually had a decent amount of success just by like basically injecting the blood of people who have actually successfully survived Ebola virus into other people as a vaccine, and that's been somewhat successful. But since it doesn't really spread, like there's not that many people to catch it, and you can actually quarantine it fairly easily because it's not airborne. Eventually, we're going to get a virus that's extremely deadly and also highly contagious because the mutate viruses and like especially RNA viruses, they can mutate extremely quickly. You don't really need a lab or anything for this. They can just mutate out of nature extremely quickly. And once an agent comes on, it will wipe out a good amount of population before it does. So Corona is, I think it's unlikely to be released by a weapons lab because there's really no purpose for it. It's not deadly enough to be a level, it's not nearly deadly enough to be like a level 4 virus. It's contagious. It doesn't really kill that many people. So people are thinking that it's been released because of population control. Not really, because it just doesn't kill people. It doesn't really kill enough people. It's not like lethal enough to be actual population control. China has billions of people. Another flu-like virus isn't really going to do too much to the population in terms of like if you're thinking like the government's evil and population control. And it doesn't really make any sense for the Chinese government to actually release this for any kind of reason, because the one thing that the communist government is the most afraid of is actually like instability. They want stability. They want people to be happy, healthy, and basically unrioting. Like these kind of things cause panic, and that's the last thing the central government actually wants. So they wouldn't actually release something like this. It's not a I don't think this is a biological weapon by another country because once again, it's not really deadly enough. So I do believe it is actually just a natural mutation off a bat or a snake or whatever. These happen every couple of years with SARS, with avian flu, with swine flu, things like that. Whenever you have animals trapped in a very tight, confined space, and it's very unsanitary, these things tend to develop, and they can easily, and because some of these are RNA viruses, they can easily jump species. So the WHO actually has declared this an emergency, but I think the World Health Organization is mainly afraid of these viruses going to like poorer countries. Like the virus in the US isn't nearly as big of a deal as people make it to be because we have the health systems and organizations to manage this. And plus, most people in the US aren't undernourished, so they're fairly strong, so the virus will probably not kill any of them anyways. But if it gets to like a poor African nation where like half the population is malnourished, and they don't have the systems to actually deal with this, it could actually induce a lot of havoc. So that's the deal with coronavirus right now. Now, you're thinking like, what is a virus that has actually struck humanity before that is both extremely contagious and very deadly? Well, you have things like smallpox, and you have things further back like bubonic plague. So bubonic plague is a prime example, and essentially Europe was a lot more sparsely populated then, so it couldn't infect as many people. But bubonic plague did wipe out roughly 1/3 of the population of Europe before it basically died out. And the only reason it died out is because it wiped out so many people in the landscape that there wasn't as many people to actually get infected and pass the virus on. Now, fun fact, for things like smallpox and bubonic plague, we actually still have them stored up in an ice laboratory somewhere. If that agent were to get out right now, even if it doesn't mutate, it would cause mass havoc, and it would kill tens of thousands more people than something like corona, because we don't have the doses of vaccines or antigens to actually combat that fast enough, and many people would die before that would actually the resistances would actually get out to them. So that's actually much more fearful than something like corona. Corona is more like the seasonal flu than anything else. Probably just a mutation of a fairly common virus strain. Corona actually refers to a family of viruses, and those have broken out before, so it's probably just another mutation. Nothing really to worry about if you're in the States. If you're in China, probably just be careful, wash your hands, do sanitation. But even if you do catch it, if you are a healthy person, it probably will not strike you down. It'll probably be like a passing fever, probably slightly worse than the regular flu. So that is the coronavirus update for today. 259 dead, over 11,000 infected, a couple of isolated cases in the United States, but no mortality so far. So that is the update. Let me know what you think, like and subscribe, and hit that bell notifications button. Thank you, and have a nice day.